Dominic nos presentará sobre diseños para el cambio, organizaciones del siglo XXI. Welcome, Dominic. Are you there?
Hi, good to be here.
How are you?
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so the stage is all yours. Good luck.
Thank you. And apologies for my dreadful Spanish, but I'll be talking you through what we're working on in the UK in English for 20 minutes or so. Real shame I can't be with you. Hope you're all healthy and doing well in Chile right now. So what I wanted to talk to you about today really is our work, is the mission that we are on at FutureGov around designing for change in public services, but also in places and communities. Just a little bit about FutureGov. We've been around for 10 years, working around the world. I visited Chile a few years ago to meet the good people at LabGob and elsewhere, but also in Europe, Australia, and elsewhere around the world. And we're very focused on supporting government to be the best it can be in working with communities to achieve shared outcomes. We hold probably what is not necessarily a trendy or popular view sometimes, which is we believe in public institutions, even sometimes when they cause great stress or distress in countries like in America right now, potentially. We have to, in our opinion, believe in the sort of public good of government and public institutions, democracy, mandates, and the authority to support communities to achieve the outcomes that they want to see in their lives. But in particular, we're very interested in helping government enter 21st century ways of working, ways of thinking, ways of collaborating. Just before coronavirus arrived, we were in the middle of launching our company mission. As I say, we were looking back at our last 10 years, and before I started FutureGov, I worked in city government in London. So have always been very much focused on what is it about our work that really we're interested in and want to focus on. And as I say, it is about making the best 21st century organizations that we possibly can, that are a catalyst for change, not just in the internet age. As you heard in my introduction, we're very interested in digital change in the broadest sense, but also change that's ready for the climate era, for the challenges that we face in that way. Both of them quite similar in, we've been aware of them, been affected by them for the last 30 or 40 years, but really have only become very central to our lives in the last 5 or 10 years, perhaps, in terms of public services and community change. FutureGov has tended to focus very strongly on organizations and government institutions. So you can see on the left-hand side, we're very focused on organization design. What is the politics, the money, the culture, the ways of working of government, what is possible politically. Service design, so how can we make sure that the services that citizens receive are elegant, effective, value for money, but also technology-enabled change as well, very much modern digital tools. And how can those three things come together at once to change government? But more recently, through our mission and elsewhere, we've been trying to rebalance our focus and make sure that we have equal sort of focus and attention on why, essentially, on why organizations in government need to be improved, where we should be focusing them. And in that way, we sort of started to see parallels around how civic technology, participatory design, and community organizing is very much similar to organization design, service design, and enterprise technology. And so how can we use all of those tools to sort of bring together government organizations and communities and citizens to make change for the better in our countries. What we're seeing, obviously, right now more than ever before, and this was true, as I say, we wrote our mission in the end of 2019, so before COVID-19 was even a word. But even more so now, we're in a world of transitions. And what we're seeing is, on the one hand, a lot of people focused on very pragmatic change. So enabling government to use video calls, doctors to speak to their patients over videos as well. So that's sort of doing the basics of the 21st century properly at last. On the other hand, people are starting to imagine big different futures, whether it's some speculative design or whether it's rewriting your country's constitution. There are some big dreams in the world right now. But what we think is really important is there's a missing middle, which is how do we help people move forward into an uncertain future, into a world where lots of futures are possible, but they might not have the ways of working, the technology designed to be able to communicate effectively, to work effectively within organizations and with communities. And we're very focused on that. I think one of the key points really is around how our organizations were never designed for the internet age, but to be honest, never really designed at all. They were created through legislation. They were sort of designed by policy people and politicians, and then government was delivered very managerially. But even more so, they've never been rethought since the last 200 years of running those organizations. But even more so, we didn't design our organizations for pandemics. And so how do we take this opportunity to think about, what we want from our organizations and our places? Because, obviously I'm not sure what its life is like in Chile right now, but the UK is entering its second lockdown tonight, which means a lot more strict conditions for the next month. And in many ways, like that's just an extension of where we are already, where we've been in this strange half world for 6 or 8 months now, working from home, where organizations and relationships with our communities are all on our laptops and through technology as much as they are in real life. And so we're little more than connected through purpose and place. It's all become very fragmented, but the opportunity ahead of us is to think about when things normalize a little bit, what is it that we want to take from the past and keep, but also learn from now and invent for the future, so that we can actually deliberately design the organizations and the communities that we want to work in and we want to live in, rather than allowing Microsoft or legislation to tell us exactly how we should work or how we should deliver public services. And so on the one hand, we're thinking very much about new ways of doing public services, which is a very sort of government-centered view, thinking about what are all those opportunities that government has available to it. If government is at the center, what is its leadership role? And obviously it has tight control over things like policy, like service delivery, money and funding, but then it also has looser and lighter sort of impact or control over behavior change, education, supporting community action. But how does it try and think deliberately about all of those opportunities and all of those mechanisms that it has to actually help design better government and better community relations? And we feel like there's this moment that we're in where the skills we have within government and within communities, the ways of working that have been tested and prototyped in the last 10 or 20 years, how do we actually understand which ones we want to really invest in and stop things like agile or design thinking being sort of for the cool people or for the people with nice offices with post-it notes, but actually becomes something fundamental to how we deliver everything we do, how we better connect with communities and deliver government services. So how do we think about agile and design as core to how we build, measure, learn, adapt our services and our change on the world? How do we learn from the period that we've been in, where, you know, as a company and as with our partners, we've had to think quickly about how to use online tools to do things we used to do in the real world. How do we do ethnography or research when it's harder to be empathetic and to connect with people? How do we think creatively about designing this new world? But equally, how do we use things like agile and new technologies to help us work as teams and as organizations far more effectively, to make sure that not only are we human-centered in how we design for our citizens, but we're human-centered in how we work with our employees so that they don't burn out, that the work is quicker, more agile, better quality, tested, fast in how we learn and implement through new ways of working. And just to give you an example of a project we've been working on in government. So this tends to be how we think about the sort of the different hierarchy of change within the government system. So everything from a single solution, a piece of technology, all the way up to a new service and a service design, possibly framed within a changed organization. And then beyond that, thinking about policy agendas, working with the community, working at a systems thinking level, and trying to influence all parts of the system for change. In this case, relating to child protection. But it's really important that we think about all these levels simultaneously, because a piece of technology is no more effective on its own than a piece of legislation. We have to think about both all the time and in every way. So one example is Family Story. It originally started with us working with colleagues in Australia, in New South Wales, which has one government department for 8 million people across geography the size of Western Europe to do child protection. We then brought it back to London, having learnt lessons there, and on a smaller scale for more like 1 million people in West London, designed Family Story, thinking very much about policy, about ways of working, and about new technology simultaneously, to think about how do we change the way child protection is done fundamentally, and how can we do something different. What we found is commonly people in government spend too much time in front of computers, filling in forms. 60-70% of a week of a frontline social worker can be spent writing notes rather than talking to families and thinking differently about how to serve and how to help with child protection. And that was as much as anything to do with the technology. Their practice, their policy was good in West London, but their case management systems were terrible. And so we've been building technology that is fit for the 21st century and actually helps those practitioners to do their job more effectively. And this is the kind of joy you can experience when you see a social worker, you see someone who is trying to protect children, use that elegant, simple piece of technology for the first time, where they've written a note, shared it with their client, and had them comment as well back in real time, much like a blog post, which changes the relationship with citizens, that says, we're in this together, I'm here for you, this is a collaboration. And the technology helps to demonstrate that, because everything I've written about you, I'm going to let you see and comment on, and we can plan what to do together to change the situation for you and your family. But for us, I think where we are right now is that we want to see more radicalism and go further. It's interesting, we found this quote from Naomi Klein after we invented the next project, but it captures the idea perfectly, which is, we're in this age now of impossible being possible. If it isn't possible now, then when is it? So we've invented a program called the Institute of Impossible Ideas to try and give a place for us to really think creatively about how we might start public services from zero, from scratch, and start again, without the legacy of 19th and 20th century government. We worked with 11 municipalities across England, and very much about, what does a publicly owned venture look like that essentially draws from examples like SpaceX, that now delivers to the space station for 20% of the cost and a better experience than NASA was able to. How could we do that for every public service? And the key idea here really was not to privatize everything. We wanted to keep it within public ownership, so not to give overall our public services to Elon Musk, which would probably be a bad thing, but instead keep it within the governance framework of government, but far enough away from the rules that we can truly reinvent it. And so we've been working on it for a year, and we're launching it and we're getting it funded as we speak, around 2 or 3 ventures that look at better housing and homelessness. We're looking at fostering and adoption of young children to help them get a better home, and also care for older adults. There's 3 very large challenges, but coming at it from a startup perspective, essentially, and trying to think about better, cheaper public services. The last thing I'll talk about is around the other side of our mission, around organizations as a platform for changing communities. And just 2 quick examples of that, where we've been supporting capability programs within England and across the European Union. So the first one is the Towns Fund, which was invented by central government in the UK. It's a £3.6 billion investment in 101 towns in England, to help them think about how can we better engage citizens, how can we better design our towns, to really think about urban regeneration, the skills of people in the towns, and also like what makes them future-proof, future-ready, in order to sort of spread the wealth of London and the southeast across England, through very sort of participatory design processes, through engagement processes, and large-scale investment. You can see on the Towns Fund website, if you're interested, we've developed this theory of change, which is around giving people a methodology to understand where they are and where their vision for the future is, how they can see where their strengths and their weaknesses are. But also, and that's the top line, it's thinking about, are you interested in further education or healthy communities or climate change as your path to the future as a town? Or are you, and also on the bottom half, how do you build leadership, governance, engagement, stakeholder management in order to support change within towns in different ways? And all of that from a very design-oriented perspective. An equally design and digital-oriented program is working with Bloomberg Philanthropies across 8 EU capital cities to help create the 21st Century City Hall. We're essentially entered into this program at the time of crisis, at the time of coronavirus, but it was designed before that, and we had to move digital and remote very quickly, which was sad for my team because they wanted to spend the year in Vilnius or Helsinki rather than their bedrooms. But this is where we are, and it's been a very effective sort of collaboration to work with Bloomberg to support, to design new services to make these city halls 21st century. And as you can see, Bloomberg's supporting 20 EU capital cities, and the ones in pink are the ones that FutureGov are helping to design new services, build new technology, and show them new ways of working to help them move forward and build capability around leadership and transformation on their own. Finally, just some thoughts on what we can learn from COVID and coronavirus. I think that picture speaks for itself. As an organization, we're very focused on all of these things simultaneously right now. We've designed many services around skills, around economic development and growth in places to support the recession or pushing through the recession. But above all, climate change. This feels like a practice for climate change, and all of that resilience and capability building that we're doing, sadly, we think is going to be important in supporting government to combat climate change as well, and actually do things differently. It very much feels like the last 20 or 30 years has been a practice. The future sort of becoming obvious to us in moments, but then suddenly in the last 6 months, it's arrived in one go. So how do we actually help people to experiment and move forward? And we've been doing some work in the UK around working with communities through coronavirus. The key thing is there's no normal that we're going back to. In that sense, it's going to be different in every aspect. But ultimately, the key themes are, how do we rebalance power? Your constitution and the change in Chile is a perfect example of grassroots community response, both to COVID and to rethinking the way that you want to govern your country, and how do we make that normal and pervasive. During coronavirus, there was a lot of great collaboration between places, between organizations. How do we get that pace, that sharing across public services? And then also, how do we remember what we value and really focus on what is ahead of us? And how do we empower communities very deliberately to support government to deliver on its mission, very much in the way things like Extinction Rebellion are focused in mobilizing communities for change. My last slide is to just say, we can never say again, something isn't possible. 2020 has shown us that we've all made the impossible possible already. So how do we keep that delivery? How do we really keep that pace and keep searching for more, for better, and work closer between government and communities to reinvent our governments and our countries? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dominic, for your beautiful talk. It was very inspirational.
Thank you.
Well, we have some questions from the audience for you. I'm going to read them first in Spanish, and then I can translate them. Vamos a ir con las preguntas del público. ¿Cómo las políticas de gobierno se pueden adaptar a la innovación si tienen tantas restricciones normativas que limitan la estructura de las organizaciones públicas? How can government policies adapt to an innovation if they have so many regulatory restrictions that limit the structure of public organizations?
I can only speak for the UK on this one, I think, rather than obviously the context that you're in Chile. But I think often we find that, when people say you can't because, you then say, okay, show me the law. And they say, okay, it's not written in law, but it is policy. And you say, fine, show me the policy. And often people will say, okay, I haven't got a policy, but we just can't do it. And I think often being sort of both strategic, visionary, challenging, but also quite, detail oriented and say, come on, prove that we can't do it. Coronavirus has really shown we can do pretty much anything we choose to. And so for me, that's how we tend to push through the change barriers and find ways through for change. Inspire, but also show that, it's yes if, not no because.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have another question. ¿Cuán importante dirías tú que es involucrar a los ciudadanos en el proceso de diseño y prueba de los servicios digitales del gobierno? How important would you say that is involve citizens into the process of designing and testing the digital services of the government?
1,000%. I think where we are right now is we're in the UK, at least, we have this sort of opportunity and threat. The threat is money. Money's very short at the moment, and so the risk is the research and design is seen as a luxury. But I think we've seen in the 20th century the way we design technology and services from the top down doesn't meet the needs of citizens, and often citizens need far less from government than government designs for. When you write a policy, often people put too much in a policy and think people want more than they do. Actually, when you deliver with people, when you test with people, when you find out what the minimum viable service is, the minimum that people really need to help them to meet their own aspirations, it's cheaper and better than when you design it in a room as a policy maker who doesn't understand the lives of the people you're working with. So I think there's both a sort of effectiveness business case, but also a financial case for designing with people, and it's becoming far more normal, to the point where hopefully at some point I don't have to persuade anyone. They just take it for granted and agree it's the way we work now.
Being here with us today. Have
No
a great
problem.
day.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.